Hello and welcome to Take the Stand, Inclusive Leaders. I'm Denis-Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Obelisk Support, a legal services business, and the founder of the first 100 Years project, which celebrates the achievements of women in law. I'm on a mission to make the legal sector a more inclusive place. And so I've invited legal industry leaders who also care about inclusivity to have a conversation with me. This week, I'm talking to Kirin Kalsi, General Counsel, Compliance Officer, and Data Protection Officer at E.on UK, which is part of a multinational electric utility company. Kirin, welcome to our series. So, to start us off, I wanted to ask you a question I ask all my guests. What does inclusive leadership mean to you?
First of all, can I say thank you, Dana, for having me on your series? I'm very flattered. And to come to your question, inclusive leadership for me means probably about two main things. I think the first one is respecting everyone, and everyone with coming from different backgrounds, having different viewpoints and different perspectives. And then linked to that, the second point is not just respecting them, but then also listening to different viewpoints and where people are coming from. And in the leadership context, I think it's so absolutely crucial. It's very easy to only see things from one viewpoint and forget about other people's views, or think, for example, you have a certain target, you need to get to that target. And then you feel, I have a plan, this is how we need to do it. But I have found time and time again, and my experience has demonstrated that it is really important to listen what others are telling you about how to get there, and to stop and think and consider other people's viewpoints, other perspectives, and sometimes in a lot of cases, actually change your viewpoint or change the direction you're taking or how you get to a certain target, because a more inclusive leadership means you bring everybody along and you have a more cohesive team.
That's really great. So actually, the next question follows that quite well, because it's asking, in your view, what are kind of two or three qualities that we, as an inclusive leader, should be looking to acquire or, strengthen or display? So what do you think, in your views, would be two or three leadership qualities for an inclusive leader?
I think the first one I already touched upon, which is the ability to listen, and not just listen, but take into account what you've heard and then react on it. I think it's really important as part of that not to shy away from sometimes admitting that you may have viewed something from a different perspective. You may sometimes have got things wrong, and to actually admit that actually I've changed my mind because I've listened to what you have said, and I do agree with you, and therefore we now will do something in a slightly different way, or change how we're going to get to a certain target. So that would be the first one. I think the second one is something that I have learned a lot over the last years being a leader, is that we all live with our own subconscious and unconscious biases. We all have them. They're all part of who we are. They're part of it's partly triggered through your background, also how you were, brought up, educated, and also your experiences in life and in particular in the workspace. And it is very difficult to switch them off. It's actually impossible to switch them off. It's also impossible to not have them, because everybody's got unconscious bias. And I think what is really important is that we're all aware of that, and that once you are aware of it, you can then tackle it or deal with it. You can't ignore it, but it's really important to be able to spot it and then be able to proactively do something about it. And it can be really simple things. For example, if you have gone out on a job advert and you're finding you're only getting a certain group of people responding to the advert, then I think it is worthwhile just double checking, is there something in our advert that therefore spoke to only a certain group of people? Have we written it with ourselves in mind, and that's why we're only attracting people who are all from a similar background and have similar details? So I think it's that openness to understand unconscious bias that's really important. And I think the third thing is to live by your values and to stand by what you believe in. And when you hear that something isn't quite right and isn't going wrong, to take some proactive action. From my personal experience, I would have to mention the menopause in that works in that space. We were having time to talk sessions with our colleagues about 4 years back, and I was leading one on the menopause, and found that we needed to do more in that space. We had all the policies written down, but we needed to do more to bring it to life. And I think as an inclusive leader, you do need to take action when it's necessary.
That's really great, actually, this focus on individual values and individuality, as a leader, and trying to define what kind of leader you can be, the best leader you can be. And you've given a little bit of an example of how you've intervened with your leadership around, say, menopause. But do you have any other example around, not necessarily being involved in a non-main business aspect of leadership? Because obviously doing supporting women, championing, all of that is part of the job, but in terms of your day-to-day main focus, obviously you have three hats, quite an expanded role. Could you give us an example of a leadership style in action that you could share with our viewers?
Yeah, I'm trying to pick the right one for you, Dana, and I might go for a few, and then you can pick which one you think is the best. To answer your question, I think one really current example is on speak up culture. We have been talking about speak up culture for a number of years. But we spotted that things weren't quite right. We were coming across, and this is mainly with my compliance hat on, we were coming across incidents where we thought, actually, we could have done better here. We could have spotted things earlier. We could have encouraged people to speak up earlier, and we could have taken action earlier. So we have, together with my compliance function and with our HR colleagues, have worked together to launch a speak up campaign where we have done everything from emails and details on our intranet, physical posters in our sites and in our offices, to having a prominent guest speaker to talk about speak up culture and to ensure that we don't fall foul of willful blindness. And in that context, I've been having discussions with my team around the post office scandal, the Horizon scandal, especially around the spotlight that throws on the role of the in-house lawyer, and therefore also the compliance space. And just making people aware of the fact that it is very easy to just get into a routine and just do what you've always done. And it's just really important to keep that view of what else is out there, and to be able to take a breathing space and thinking time to look at, actually, let me look at this bigger picture. Let me just take some time to think this through. And especially in these busy lives we lead, with about 5 different pieces of tech pinging at us every single day with apps and this and that, it's really important to take out time to think, because that is, in my view, the most important aspect for a leader, because the time to think gives you time to reflect, but also to spot things that you may otherwise just carry on doing, but to spot things that might either you want to do differently, or you may feel need a different perspective.
That's a great example, actually, this one about safety to speak up. It's a really great one. Looking back at your journey, and obviously you're a very experienced lawyer, can you think and share with us an example of inclusive leadership that you benefited from, part of your career journey, and why was it important for you that you had that experience, and how did it shape you to be the leader you are today?
I've probably got a couple of examples in my career where it's been really important to have somebody, to have a sponsor, somebody who, first of all, listens to you, understands where you're coming from and what your personal values, and therefore your personal, what will work for you personally, and then encourages you to take a step that you might otherwise not be confident to take. And I've had that happen to me, and I can think of two circumstances in my career where that was really prominent in me taking a step that I would have otherwise been either too cautious or possibly not confident enough to take. But having somebody encourage me to take it, actually point out to me that, first of all, give me the courage and confidence, and point out to me why all the things in my head I'm thinking is negative and why I couldn't do something were actually dwarfed by all the positive things that I could bring and qualities I have and skills that I could bring. And you do need a third party to remind you of that, because your own head usually gives you very mixed messages quite frequently. And I have to say, without, in particular, those two interventions, I don't think I would be where I am today. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be where I am today.
Another great example actually links to my next question, which focuses on what do you think is the biggest barrier to us achieving more inclusion? Obviously, one of them is not enough underrepresented groups are getting the sponsorship. That's basically also part of your, if you like, the flip side of your example. But can you think of any other example or share your views around what you think is holding us back, and what is the barrier that is preventing us from being more inclusive?
Can I give you two sides to that, two answers to that? Because I think one of the barriers is ourselves, is not necessarily having the confidence or the having had the right briefings or the training to actually push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So I do think a lot of barriers we make up ourselves, but you need somebody on the outside to give you that push and say, look, I think you can do this. And once you've done it, you then get that confidence, and you are much more confident the next time round. So I would encourage everybody, if they're going through a difficult or something they're not quite sure whether to do or not, to reach out to a network of people who understand them and can give them that courage and that positive reinforcement. And it needs to be people who you are confident are not biased and are not just telling you what you want to hear, but are actually going to give you a really honest view. So I think the role of sponsors is really important. And I think the second piece is, Dana, is I think, and this might sound a bit counterintuitive, I think we have made massive strides over the last 50 years. And if you put that into perspective, and or 100 years, because I know you sponsored the 100 years piece, and I think it is being proactive in some of that storytelling about the positive aspects, rather than just talking about we've still got a long way to go. Because you look at, for example, the gender pay gap, and we've still got a long way to go, but we are making really positive strides in that space by the reporting and employers taking it more seriously and actually proactively doing something to work against that. So I think I'm afraid I'm going to have to say, and I'm naturally not a very patient person, there is an element of these things will take time, but it's initiatives like yours. It is openly talking about it, being quite open about proactive, positive steps on both on LinkedIn, in your own personal social network, that I think will make that positive impact. It's that storytelling that will give people the positive view of things, how things are improving, and therefore will also give more confidence to people to take the next step or to push for something that they may otherwise not want to.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm a great believer in benchmarking. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I set up the first 100 years, was because we were comparing stats in a vacuum all the time. So there was no back reference, were we progressing compared to where exactly? So what is the starting point? But also, as you say, what is the end point? If the end point is to eradicate pay gap, let's make that a strategic goal and then think about how we get there, rather than constantly moving the goalposts, because I think sometimes it feels like we are on shifting sands all the time. And there are a lot of problems in the world, and we can go after all of them. But if we go after all of them all at the same time, it will be very difficult to make any progress in any of them, you know. So you feel constantly frustrated by the lack of pace, as opposed to looking at some of the positives and then also where the focus should be. So I agree with you. I think having a more strategic approach is important. And actually, that leads me to the next question, because obviously, as a legal sector, we have made progress, but I was wondering what your view is in relation to creating a more inclusive profession, more inclusivity. What do you think we could do more of as a profession and as individual leaders to get us to a better place, and maybe faster as well?
I think in my mind, there's a really important piece about role modeling, because you need to be able to see, and there is much more opportunity now to see where you want to be than there used to be when I started off in my legal career. And I think it is role modeling, but also being comfortable with where you are and what you are doing. There is a lot of people, especially in the legal sector, where I see they've got conflicting things going on in their role doesn't necessarily fit with their values. They're finding there's too much pressure being put on them, whether it's the role, what is happening in their personal life. And I think it's really important for people to themselves work out their own perspective and their own priorities and what works for them. Because when you try and work by what other people are doing, that is just never going to get you to your own, what I would call your own happy space. I think it's really important to not just be role modeling, but also for yourself, not just to be looking at role models, but actually potentially reaching out to them, but also sharing where you may be struggling at the moment and getting an outside perspective around what is really important to you. And I think you do need to work out what is really important to yourself personally, not what other people think or other people expect from you, but what is really important to you. And then that will then create for you that right space.
Again, you're leading very nicely into the next question, because basically, to help somebody start by asking the right questions of themselves, I wonder, what do you think would be a good question for somebody who aspires to be an inclusive leader? They should ask themselves. What is the one question you think is a helpful one, part of this introspection, to help you emerge as a stronger inclusive leader?
I think, Dana, to be a good and inclusive leader, I think one of the best tricks I have found is to think about what advice would I give my younger self, either when I started off in my career or when I hit stumbling blocks in my career, and to think about what advice would have been helpful or what advice did I receive at the time. And that to remember those stumbling blocks in your career, things when things didn't go so well and how you overcame those, in my mind, is a really, that's what shapes you as a leader, but it's a really good way to support your teams and to be a better leader yourself.
That's great. And that takes us to our last question. And you did mention role models. So, of course, I will have to ask you, who was your role model? And can you tell us why?
That's a really good question, Dana. I don't think I had any role models, because when I started off in my career over 30 years ago, I couldn't see anybody like me who who was what I wanted to be. I sort of picked bits of different people and thought, oh, I'd quite like to do this. I'd quite like to be like that. I find it now easier to see role models of what I would want to be, let's say, in 10, 15 years' time. But there wasn't that much around when I started with my career 30 years ago. And I can give you a light-hearted answer to this, which is, I think one of the TV programs that encouraged me always to just go for things was for, and this might sound really, really amusing, was for want of a better word, Star Trek. Because if you look at Star Trek, the original series, it was always really inclusive. There were always people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and they all had a role to play and they all were respected. And this sounds probably ridiculous, but to me, that was a big driver in actually thinking, yeah, that is what it should be like.
That sounds like a great answer, actually, not least because obviously it was science fiction, but when we look around, actually that science fiction is no longer science fiction for a lot of us, right? So the world has come, what looked like completely a different world, it's actually much more our reality. So I think it's a great example, and thanks to people like you. So thank you so much for joining us, Kirin. It's been great chatting to you and hearing your views around inclusive leadership. And to our viewers, I hope you found this conversation interesting and useful, and it's given you plenty of ideas for making your workplace, your team, and organization more inclusive. To find more conversations on inclusivity, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Obelisk Support, or connect with me on LinkedIn, searching Dana Denis-Smith and heading to my video sections. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at d.denis-smith@obelisksupport.com. Thank you for listening, and thank you for tuning in to Take the Stand, Inclusive Leaders. See you next time.